On the third day, after the zombie apocalypse erupted, I was curled up inside a manhole beside the city's main arterial road, listening to the dragging sounds above my head and the sticky squelching noise of rotten flesh scraping against the ground. Every hair on my body standing on end. The inner wall of the shaft was cold and damp, the narrow space barely allowing me to huddle on my side with my knees pressed to my chest, yet I did not dare move at all. Even though my fingertips were already numb, I still bit down hard on my lip, forcing myself not to make the slightest sound. The heavy cast-iron cover cut off most of the madness outside, leaving only a faint beam of light filtering through the ventilation gap, and I, Sandy, had become the sole fish that slipped through the net of this feast, hiding beneath their feet, clinging to life in the darkness. Welcome to Panda's Storyboard. Put on your headphones, get cozy, and settle in. Let's enjoy this story together. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. Now, let's begin. 2 nights earlier, when the last light in the office went out, I rubbed my aching eyes and shoved the mountain of reports on my desk into a drawer, exhaustion flooding over me like a tide as I only wanted to rush back to my rented room and sleep soundly. Just then, my phone suddenly vibrated, the screen lighting up with a message from Beatrice. Beatrice was my closest friend, who should have been studying for her graduate degree in the capital, yet the message she sent left me utterly confused. Stock up on food. Find somewhere to hide. I stared at the line for 3 seconds, then couldn't help laughing. This girl had always loved post-apocalyptic novels. Had she gotten so immersed that she was mixing fiction with reality? Just as I was about to reply, "Stop messing around, I'm exhausted," my phone vibrated again. This time it was 2 messages in a row, short but carrying an urgency that brooked no doubt. Not a joke. Act immediately. Those 6 words jolted me fully awake. Beatrice had always been steady by nature and never joked about things like this, and a powerful sense of unease crept up my spine. Without a second's hesitation, I immediately called her back. The moment the call connected, what came through the receiver was not her usual gentle voice, but rapid breathing laced with panic and fear, along with faint explosions and screams in the background. "Hurry, Sandy, go buy food and water right now, as much as you can, then find an absolutely safe place to hide." Beatrice's voice trembled, breaking up as if she were speaking while running. "Beatrice, what's going on? What happened over there?" I pressed urgently, my fingers turning white from how tightly I clenched them. "It's too complicated. I don't have time to explain. Those things, they're not human." Her voice suddenly shot up, followed by a violent crash. "Don't look back. Don't try to contact anyone. Take care of yourself first. Hide. You must survive." The call ended abruptly, replaced by a busy tone that rang in my ears. An overwhelming dread swallowed me whole. I stood frozen, my mind blank, Beatrice's final, desperate warning echoing in my ears. A few seconds later, I snapped back to my senses, grabbed my backpack and car keys, and stumbled out of the office. I was alone in the elevator, my pale, panicked face reflected in the mirrored walls, the weightless drop as it descended making my stomach churn. I burst out of the company doors, the cool night air slapping my face, yet doing nothing to calm me. The streets were still bustling with traffic and hurried pedestrians. I started the car, the tires screeching sharply against the pavement and drawing startled looks from passers-by, but I couldn't care less. All I wanted was to reach the supermarket as fast as possible, then drive to my parents' home in the county town. The county was a 2-hour drive from the city. My parents were elderly and in poor health, and I had to get to them as soon as possible. The tires rattled over uneven roads, the headlights slicing a ghastly white path through the darkness ahead. Suddenly, my phone on the passenger seat began vibrating madly, message after message from Beatrice popping up, each one hammering at my heart. "The capital has fallen. They're fast. They eat people. Don't look back. Don't help anyone. Hide first. Don't make any noise." Immediately after, 3 videos began loading. The footage shook violently, clearly filmed while Beatrice was running, the blurred images capturing sheer chaos, screams and cries rising and falling, twisted humanoid figures tearing into and devouring normal people. They moved with terrifying agility, nothing like the slow zombies from movies. Closest to the camera, a man in a suit had his face smeared with blood. His mouth split into a grotesque grin as he used sharp canine teeth to rip open a woman's abdomen, blood and organs spilling out in a sight too horrible to bear. In another clip, a middle school student in a uniform suddenly convulsed and stood up, his neck twisted at an impossible angle, intestines dragging on the ground as he lunged toward the crowd. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding along the roadside before stopping. Dinner and bile surged up my throat. I shoved the door open and collapsed by the road, vomiting violently until there was nothing left but sour bile burning my throat. I was terrified beyond measure, my entire body shaking, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. The scenes in those videos were far too real, far too bloody, making it impossible to believe this was reality. Yet Beatrice's tone and the screams in the footage told me clearly this was no dream. A true apocalypse had arrived. After sitting in the car for over 10 minutes, I finally restarted the engine with trembling fingers, opened the navigation, and decided to detour through H City before heading to my hometown, hoping to replenish supplies there. The dashboard's glow cast my face in a sickly pallor. In the rearview mirror, the city behind me still glittered with lights, yet I knew that prosperity might soon be reduced to ruins. The city closest to the capital gradually shrank into a tiny point in the darkness, and it was likely already a living hell. I drove through the entire night, and as dawn approached and the car neared the Ring Expressway out of H City, a series of violent explosions suddenly erupted in the distance. Flames shot into the sky, dyeing the Welcome to H City sign at the toll station a blazing red. Instinctively, I hit the brakes. 500 meters ahead, several cars had crashed into one another and were burning fiercely, blocking the road, and the horrors from last night's videos were now playing out before my eyes. A figure clung to the window of a small car in an utterly twisted posture, his neck bent back nearly 180 degrees, his lips smeared with brain matter biting precisely into the screaming woman in the driver's seat. Her shrill, desperate screams lasted only a few seconds before dissolving into muffled whimpers, then disappearing completely. My soul nearly fled my body as I yanked the steering wheel hard, the car veering off the road and plowing through the green belt, carving deep ruts as the tires spun wildly and the vehicle rocked violently. I gripped the wheel with all my strength, my mind a total blank. Yet before I could recover, the carnage at the next intersection slammed into view, over a dozen cars piled together, flames roaring skyward. Cold sweat soaked my palms, and the fuel warning light began flashing. The tank was almost empty. Worse still, I suddenly heard a dull thump on the roof, as if something had landed there. I looked up through the sunroof and met a face mangled beyond recognition. A man in a delivery uniform, half his cheek rotted away to reveal white bone, his cloudy eyes devoid of any life, as his ruined fingers pierced the sunroof seal and clawed inward. A scream tore from my throat as terror drove every ounce of strength into my right foot, the car lurching forward with a shriek of the engine. In my panic, I flung the door open, my body hurled out by inertia, slamming hard onto the road and rolling several times before coming to a stop. Agony exploded through my body, especially my knees and elbows, burning fiercely where the skin had been scraped raw. I struggled to my feet and looked back, seeing the delivery uniform zombie standing atop the speeding car, roaring at me in rage, its hoarse voice, like a broken bellows, tearing at the air. I didn't dare linger, nor imagine what would happen if it lunged again. I scanned my surroundings frantically for somewhere to hide, but the street was pure chaos, burning vehicles, scattered corpses, and frenzied zombies everywhere, nowhere remotely safe. Then my gaze caught a rusted manhole cover by the roadside, its edges eaten away by time. It was a communications shaft, perhaps the only corner of the city not yet occupied. I spotted my backpack lying in the grass nearby, containing the few supplies I had hastily packed the night before, along with the entrenching shovel I kept in the car. Ignoring the pain, I sprinted toward it, snatched up the pack and shovel, then charged toward the manhole 5 meters away, a distance that now felt like crossing mountains and seas. My heart thundered in my ears, my breath ragged, the shrill howls behind me drawing closer, sharp enough to seem ready to sink into the back of my neck. I reached the cover, crouched, jammed the shovel tip into the seam, and pried with all my strength. With a shriek, the heavy lid lifted a crack, a stench of mold and damp earth rushing out, and without hesitation, I jumped in. The instant my body dropped inside, a chill brushed my back as something sharp tore my jacket. I looked up to see the delivery uniform zombie sprawled at the opening, its rotten fingers inches from my face, murky eyes fixed on me, as black, briny saliva dripped from its mouth. Driven by pure instinct, I slammed the cover shut, the deafening clang reverberating through the confined space and leaving my ears ringing. I collapsed into the pooled water at the bottom, completely spent, gasping for air as icy water soaked my clothes, yet I felt no cold at all, only the relief of survival and terror etched into my bones. Above me came the scratching and howling as the zombies prowled the lid, knowing living prey hid below, moonlight filtering through the vent to reveal countless shadows writhing overhead like soul-snatching demons. Only then did I realize my right hand still clenched the shovel, my knuckles white, the blade smeared with black-red scraps of flesh, likely from brushing against a zombie as I jumped in. My stomach churned, and I barely managed not to vomit. What crushed me most was realizing that in my rush, the backpack strap had snagged on the cover and fallen outside. After an unknown length of time, the scratching above gradually faded, whether from lost patience or new prey drawing them away, and I stayed curled against the wall, stiff and unmoving. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself, but my mind was a tangled mess of bloody images and Beatrice's final words, fear and anxiety weaving together until exhaustion dragged me into sleep. When morning light seeped in through the drain, I jolted awake to the unmistakable vibration of the iron cover above. Not the wind, not imagination. They were still there. I held my breath, barely daring to move, even as my stomach betrayed me with a loud growl, and sour liquid rose in my throat, hunger and thirst gnawing after a full day and night without food or water. My lips were cracked and bleeding, my throat raw as sandpaper, every swallow tinged with iron. The backpack was still outside, and inside it, besides water and biscuits, was a drone I once used for aerial filming. My only hope now, perhaps a way to scout the outside, find an escape route, or even other supplies. I stared at the manhole cover, nails digging into my palms, when suddenly a shrill scream echoed from afar. Help! No! It was a human voice, filled with despair and terror. And before the sound could fade, my heart clenched tight. The screaming lasted only a few seconds before it cut off abruptly, replaced by the wet, sticky sound of flesh being torn apart and the sharp crack of bones shattering between serrated teeth. At the same moment, the vibrations above my head, around the manhole cover, vanished. Those zombies had clearly been drawn away by the fresh blood and flesh, rushing toward the source of the noise. It was a perfect opportunity. Only then did I dare to move, just a little, my limbs already stiff and numb, struggling to change position within the cramped space. I slowly reached up toward the manhole cover above my head, but the instant my fingers touched the cold cast iron, they froze. I would die. What if they suddenly came back? What if the cover jammed and wouldn't open? Or I was discovered the moment it moved? A shrill voice screamed inside my head, paralyzing me with hesitation. I knew that if I didn't act now, once those zombies returned, I would never have another chance. Either I risked it now, or I would be trapped forever in this narrow communications shaft, slowly starving, slowly dehydrating, until death took me. Either now, or forever. I lowered my head and looked at the cables at the bottom of the shaft. The fiber optic lines in these communication wells connected to nearby pipelines, stretching out in all directions beneath the city. Slowly, I reached out and grabbed one of the thicker-looking cables, tugging at it gently. The cable scraped against the conduit, producing a faint rustling sound. Several dozen meters away, from another communication well, came a soft clang, probably the terminal junction box at the end of the cable striking the well wall. All sound on the street stopped instantly. Then came a creak, the sound of rotting joints grinding as they moved. The zombies were clearly drawn by this sudden noise, shuffling toward its source. I held my breath and listened carefully. Their footsteps were heavy and dragging, carrying an inhuman stiffness. One step, 2 steps, 3 steps, until the last dragging sound faded into the far end of the street, and all fell silent again. Now, I summoned all my strength and shoved the manhole cover open a crack. Blazing white sunlight poured through the gap, stabbing into my eyes and sending sharp pain through my skull. Tears streamed down uncontrollably. I didn't dare wait to adjust. I slipped out through the opening at once, stumbled toward the backpack not far away, yanked it up, and leapt back into the shaft as fast as I could. Pulling the cover shut again, at the instant the cover closed, an unwilling howl rang out from the distance. Very close. A zombie had clearly spotted me, but it was already too late. In the darkness, I collapsed into the pooled water, gasping for breath. With trembling hands, I opened my backpack, pulled out a compressed biscuit, and stuffed it into my mouth without a second thought. The biscuit was soaked through, sticky and mushy, bitter with salt, yet to me it tasted like the finest food in the world. I fumbled for the drone controller and pressed the power button. The screen lit up, flashing a glaring warning. 17% battery remaining. I stared at the launch button, my thumb hovering above it, unable to press down. If it flew out, it might never come back. I knew the noise of a drone in flight could easily attract zombies. If that happened, not only would the drone be destroyed, my position could be exposed as well. But I had no other choice. I had to know what was happening outside. I had to find more supplies. Otherwise, even if I survived now, I would only starve to death later. Taking a deep breath, I reached out again and grabbed the same cable, pulling it slowly, feeling the friction as it slid through the conduit. Several dozen meters away, another clang echoed as it struck some well wall in the underground network. The howls above my head stopped abruptly. The zombies that might have been turning back were once again lured away by the sound, rushing toward it. I held my breath as their heavy footsteps gradually faded. I shoved the manhole cover open wider and pressed the drone's launch button. With a sharp whine, the drone shot out like a hummingbird, rising swiftly into the air. And at the moment I closed the cover again, I caught a glimpse of a rotting ankle at the edge of the opening, less than half a meter away. My heart leapt into my throat. I didn't dare breathe until the cover was completely sealed, and no sound came from outside. Only then did I exhale, gripping the controller tightly. The screen shook violently, showing the drone's live feed. I held on as if my life depended on it, terrified that a single jolt would send it crashing into the swarm. The camera swept over a hellish street. 30 meters away, the familiar Huimin supermarket stood there, its glass doors miraculously intact, not yet breached. Through the glass, rows of canned food, bottled water, and snacks were still neatly arranged. It was nothing short of paradise in the apocalypse. But the scene farther out chilled me to the bone. The entire commercial street was ablaze, thick smoke rolling upward and blotting out half the sky. Through the smoke, countless zombie hordes wandered aimlessly, like soulless shells, drifting through the ruins. On the balcony of the nearest residential building, several dark figures huddled together, devouring something unknown. Dark red liquid dripped down the railing, pooling into a bloodstain on the ground below. My throat tightened. Hope and despair tore at my heart at the same time. The supermarket was so close, only 30 meters away, yet those 30 meters were an uncrossable chasm. Zombies roamed everywhere, and at their speed, the moment I stepped outside, I wouldn't last 3 seconds before being surrounded and torn apart. Suddenly, the camera caught the scene above my manhole cover. The zombie in the delivery uniform had returned, using its rotting fingers to pry at the edge of the cover. Its nails were worn down to the bone, pale and exposed, yet it kept repeating the futile motion. Only then did I notice the precision of the manhole structure. The cast iron edges were locked tightly into molded grooves. Without tools like a crowbar, 1 or 2 zombies simply couldn't open it. And zombies, it seemed, were incapable of effective communication. They acted purely on instinct. If a whole group worked together, they might actually tear the ground apart. But they clearly lacked that kind of intelligence. So, even you have things you can't do. I silently curled my cracked lips into a bitter smile. At least for now, I was safe. The drone continued flying, the camera scanning the surrounding streets. I saw more devastation, and a few places that might hold supplies, but all of them were swarmed by zombies, impossible to approach. Then the sky suddenly darkened. Without warning, heavy raindrops slammed down, instantly turning into a torrential downpour. Rain battered the drone's body, disrupting its stability. The image on the screen blurred, and the drone began wobbling back through the curtain of rain. Panic surged through me as I frantically adjusted the controller, guiding it back toward the communications shaft. By the time I finally pulled it back inside, rainwater had already flooded half the shaft, rising to my knees. I clutched the drone tightly and watched the water level climb. At this rate, the entire shaft would be filled within half an hour. I would drown here, alive. Fear of death surged through me. I scrambled along the shaft wall, desperately searching for an escape route, or at least a place to temporarily avoid the rising water. But the walls were smooth and hard. Aside from dense cables, there was nothing. The water kept rising, reaching my chest, then my neck. I tilted my head back, using my last strength to press my nose beneath the ventilation hole in the manhole cover. That hole, thinner than my little finger, was now my only source of air. Every breath was a struggle. The water climbed higher, leaving less than 10 centimeters to the cover. In 5 minutes, maybe less, I would be completely submerged and suffocate. And then, near the tightly sealed right side, my calf suddenly felt something strange. The water there wasn't rising. It was swirling, unnaturally, as if a vortex were tugging at me. That subtle anomaly sparked hope. I plunged underwater, holding my breath, groping wildly through the darkness. My fingers scraped frantically along the concrete base until my nails caught on a narrow crack, almost imperceptible, yet clearly the source where water was being sucked away. I pulled out the entrenching shovel I carried with me and dove fully into the murky rainwater. Each strike against the concrete base was muffled by the liquid, turning into a string of tiny bubbles that drifted upward. After every few blows, I surfaced to gasp for air and listened carefully for movement above the cover. Zombie footsteps were still wandering nearby, but they didn't seem to notice anything unusual below. Perhaps the rain masked my sounds. As I kept digging, the crack widened. When it grew to the width of a fist, the water level in the shaft suddenly began to drop rapidly, the vortex growing stronger. I slumped onto the gradually exposed bottom, gasping for air, watching as the whirlpool devoured the filthy water beneath my feet until the last drop vanished. The sludge was washed away, revealing a pitch-black opening. Below, it wasn't solid earth as I had expected, but a massive ravine carved out by years of rainwater erosion, at least dozens of square meters wide. I traced the edge of the opening unconsciously, and a wild idea struck me. This communications shaft might not be a dead end after all. This underground ravine might lead somewhere else. My entire body trembled not with fear, but with a near maniacal excitement. I had finally found a way to survive. My mind raced, calculating possibilities. This ravine, formed by rainwater, was likely connected to the city's underground drainage network. And the supermarket, 30 meters away, surely it had its own communication shaft, or sewer access, underground. If I could dig a passage through this ravine to the supermarket's underground shaft, I could safely obtain those supplies. I might even establish a temporary shelter beneath the supermarket itself. With that thought, I acted immediately. I blocked the opening with my foot and watched as muddy rainwater slowly refilled the shaft. When it rose past my chest, my neck, and finally stopped just 2 fingers below my nostrils, I took a deep breath and dove again, shovel in hand, carefully digging into the corrugated conduit of the communications network. This line led directly toward the supermarket, 30 meters away. If I followed it, I should reach the supermarket's underground shaft. I swung the shovel again and again, sand and silt cascading down, swept away into the ravine by the current. Every impact against the pipe made my entire body tense, terrified the sound would draw zombies above. Though the sewage absorbed most of the noise, the footsteps above seemed to multiply. The sound of rotting fingers scraping the iron cover grew more frequent, as if at any moment a gray hand might pierce the water to grab my hair. Fear filled my mind, driving me like a panicked hamster, swinging the shovel non-stop without daring to pause. My arms soon burned with unbearable pain, every movement heavy and slow. Yet I couldn't stop, because stopping meant death. Only when the rain gradually eased and the water level began to drop did I dare to halt for a moment. I curled up at the bottom of the shaft, listening to the overlapping howls and scratching above, my heart drowning in anxiety. Maybe my tunnel wouldn't be finished before the zombies tore the cover open. At that moment, fear and helplessness intertwined, nearly breaking me. With the last of my strength, I lifted the shovel and pressed its edge against my own neck. Better to end it myself than be torn apart by zombies. At least that way, there would be less pain. But just then, a bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by deafening thunder. The rain surged again, heavy drops hammering the manhole cover with a thunderous roar. That sudden noise perfectly concealed the sounds below. Hope flared anew. I clenched my teeth, let the water rise again, and resumed digging. The soaked sand layer underground had softened, and each shovel strike pulled up clumps of wet grit. Sand jammed beneath my fingernails, stabbing with pain. My wounds, soaked in filthy water, turned pale and swollen, throbbing fiercely. I ignored it all. I don't know how long I dug. My fingers eventually stopped obeying me, and I tied the shovel to my wrist, using my body weight to press downward.